The poem To the Nile by John Keats. Let's read it. This is the second sonnet you are going to study in the syllabus. This sonnet is addressed to the longest river in the world, the Nile, River Nile. The Nile is situated in and flows through Africa and ends its journey in Egypt. Now, this Nile River has been a fascinated river for Africans as well as for non-Africans. There are many literary creations done around this fascinating river. Now, this poem comes under the theme of nature, according to syllabus. The Nile is presented as a nature's element from different point of view. Nature's element from different point of view. John Keats was a poet who admired nature, nature's spirit, nature's love for man, and man's love for nature, both. Now here, in this poem, Keats admires the Nile as an aesthetic, fascinating river, naturally, but at the same time, he rejects all superstitious powers, mythical powers given on this river by Africans. Right. Now let's read the sonnet first. Please put the numbers before each line. How many lines are there in a sonnet? How many lines are there in a sonnet?
14.
Yeah.
14.
Correct. 14 lines, Ishan. There are 14 lines in a sonnet. Sonnet is some kind of address. Some kind of address or some kind of appreciation done to a certain person or object. Now, let's read it first. Son of the old moon mountains, African, chief of the pyramid and crocodile. We call thee fruitful, and that very while a desert fills our seams inward span. Nurse of the sought nations since the world began, art thou so fruitful, or dost thou beguile such men to honor thee, who worn with toil rest for a space twixt Cairo and Deccan? Oh, may dark fancies err. They surely do. It is ignorance that makes a barren waste of all beyond itself. Thou dost bedew green rushes like our rivers, and dost taste the pleasant sunrise. Green isles hast thou too, and to the sea as happily dost haste. Now here in this sonnet, as in the sonnet to the evening star, uh, the poetic language is old English. Now you are already familiar with this language because of the novel you are doing. Now even in the novel, Prince and Pauper, The Prince and the Pauper, the language is poetic, old English. Now here, those words from the old English are still found. Now, the poet is the speaker here. The poet is the speaker here. He speaks to the Nile. He speaks to the Nile river. The Nile is personified. The Nile is personified as thou. As thou. Right? First person point of view is used because poet is within the poem. As thou. Now, let's go line by line in understanding what John Keats has to say. What John Keats has to say about this longest river in the world today. We believe so. We never measured its length, but it is believed to be so. To the Nile. Now you see the topic, to the Nile means referring to Nile, the Nile river. He's writing this poem to the Nile. Son of the all moon mountains, Africans. Now you see how the Nile is personified as what? The sun. The Nile is the son of all moon mountains. Now moon mountains, old moon mountains. Moon mountains are also personified. Note them down. Moon mountains are also personified. Now moon mountains are personified as parents. Parents of a son, a child. Who's this child? The Nile. Then the Nile is the son or child. The all moon mountains are his parents. Now all moon mountains, they have some other images, meanings, associations. They are close to moon or heaven. Now moon symbolizes heaven. Heaven. Now what is the idea here? The Nile is not an ordinary river, but it begins from heavenly mountain. People give the Nile a divine birth. Divine birth. The Nile is a son of some divinity. The Moon Mountain implies that. And naturally, according to nature's point of view, Moon Mountain means high mountains, which are close to moon. They are so high. They are snow covered. And from these high mountains, the Nile begins. That is from nature's point of view. But from poetic point of view and from common people's belief, the Nile is a river that descends from heaven, moon mountains. Therefore, all moon mountains are some personified figures of some divine parents. Divine parents. African believes so. Not us. African believes so. Now, every country, there is a river which is holy to them. Now in India, Ganges, Ganga, Ganges is holy to them. They worship Ganges. Now in Africa, they worship the Nile. Now here this first line is an address to the Nile. It's a technique. If you are speaking to something or personified object, it's a technique in poetry. What is that technique? Even in To the Evening Star, we discussed this technique. Now, we call it apostrophe. A-P-O-S-T-R-O-P-H-E. Apostrophe. Even the second line, number 2, chief of the pyramids and crocodiles. Now, the Nile is further personified as chief. The Nile is further personified as the chief. Chief means leader. Leader of the pyramids and crocodiles. Leader of the pyramids and crocodiles. Now we know on the river banks of the Nile, there are the greatest structure of human civilization, the pyramids. You may have heard it in Egypt. Pyramids. Now these pyramids, they are very huge. Hundreds of acres are covered by one pyramid. Then the Nile River is also famous for the dangerous crocodile. Dangerous crocodile. Now, Africans believe this Nile is the ruler of these huge pyramids and dangerous crocodile. This is also some apostrophe, an apostrophe addressing the Nile River. Now here you see in these two lines, John Keats presents how African people how African people see the Nile. For the African people, the Nile is divine river, holy river, a great river. The Nile is the leader, ruler of the land. He rules the pyramid. He rules the crocodile. He gives them leadership. That is the Africans' image about the Nile. They believe so, even today. Ordinary people, including the poet, we, third line, call thee fruitful. Thee means you. We call you fruitful. What is fruitful? Fruitful means many uses, useful, resourceful, fruitful, helpful. Now, people believe the Nile River, the Nile is fruitful, resourceful, supporting to the people. In a way, there is some truth. Why? The Nile gives them water. The Nile gives them food. The Nile gives them transportation. The Nile gives them aesthetic beauty, entertainment, everything. But not, poet says, the Nile is not 100% fruitful, 100% useful, helpful, resourceful. Why? And that very while, at the same moment, a desert fills our seeing's inward span. Desert. Now this river, the Nile, it flows through a desert. It flows through a desert, a barren land. Desert means a barren land. There are no trees, no animals, full of sand, a sandy land. Now, poet says, there is a vast desert filling our seeing's inward span. What is in inward span? It refers to your eyes, your sight. Poet comments that as far as we see, there is a huge desert. He questions, if the Nile is so fruitful, resourceful, why there is a deep, vast, huge desert? It cannot be so. If the Nile is fruitful, if the Nile is resourceful, the land should be full of trees and animals. But he says, there are no trees, no animals, no life. There is only sandy desert. Therefore, poet argues that the Nile is not perfectly fruitful, 100% fruitful. It has some weakness. John Keats does not completely agree with the idea that the Nile is a fruitful river. It's an argument, poet's argument, right? Poet's argument. Now, fifth line. Nurse of the salt nations. Now, nurse of the salt nation is a metaphor. Underline. It's a metaphor used for the Nile. What is the idea? Nurse. Nurse means protector, caretaker, a loving character. Salt nations means these hardworking people, that is Africans. Now, you know, African live a very hard life in the desert. In the desert, there are people. In the Sahara Desert, there are people. But they live very hard life, very difficult life. Now, it is believed that Nile is their protector. There is some truth. Yes, the Nile gives some protection to these people. The Nile gives some water, as I told you, food, traveling. The Nile supports their life. Therefore, the Nile is the nurse of salt nations. Since the beginning of the world, from very unknown time, from time immemorial, we do not know the real time. Since the beginning of the world, the Nile has been a protector to these people. The poet still questions, art thou so fruitful? Are you really resourceful? Are you really resourceful? He questions, are you really resourceful? Because poet is not satisfied about the Nile's fruitful nature. Therefore, he questions, oh, dost thou beguile, or do you cheat? Beguile means cheat or deceive. Or do you deceive such men, such people, Africans, to honor thee, to respect you? Oh, do you deceive, cheat the Africans to respect you? The poet questions. And these Africans who they are worn with toil, tired, hard-working, worn with toil. Toil means hard work. They are much tired, exhausted with hard work. Who rest, who live. Here rest means live. Who live for a space in a land. Space means here land, in an area, in a region. Space means region, twixt, between Cairo and Deccan. Cairo and Deccan, they are two cities. Now, the simple idea, poet questions, hey, the Nile, do you cheat the people who live in between Cairo and Deccan to honor you, to respect you? The poet question. The poet question, right? Because he does not believe the Nile's fruitfulness. He does not believe the Nile's fruitfulness because it has some weakness. What is the weakness? There is a desert. If the Nile is fruitful, there cannot be a desert. Right. Now, we have discussed half of the sonnet. We'll go on this discussion in our next session, in our next class.